Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this webinar. And thank you to our excellent sponsors, Kuoni Tumlar, for that really tempting glimpse of various corners of Europe. And for those of you who missed it, we'll be showing that again a little bit later. My name's Tim from ETOA, and I'm joined by four excellent panelists to talk about small group tourism this afternoon. So I'm just going to ask each of them to just say who they are, briefly characterize the organization, and then we're going to get into the substance of it. And I'll explain a little bit after the introductions how you, the audience, can participate. But I'll go in the order I see on my screen. So I'll ask John, then Richard to introduce themselves, then George and Brett, please. So John.
Hi everyone, my name's John. I represent Context Travel, where I'm the Director of Product Development and Expert Community.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard. I am commercially responsible for Eating Europe. We are a food tour and a culinary experience operator since 2011. We currently operate in 20 cities in Europe. So nice to meet all of you.
Well, hi everyone, I'm George. I am Chief Marketing Officer at Global Touring. We're a collective of 3 small group touring brands. We have Top Deck Travel, Backroads Touring, and Grasshopper Adventures. And I lead the marketing function, so that covers brand marketing, digital, and our direct sales revenue.
Hi everyone, my name is Brett Walker. I am the General Manager at Collette here in Canada. I'm in Toronto, Canada. I also oversee much of our international operations. Collette is a guided tour operator. Very happy to be here.
Thank you very much all. And behind the scenes, and correcting the gender balance somewhat, because normally we do have a variety of people on the panel. Sophie and Lo, my colleagues behind the scenes, are going to be keeping an eye on some questions and comments and jump in if we have any systems issues. I'd like to point out, for those of you not familiar with Zoom, if you hover your cursor towards the bottom of the screen and towards the right of center, you'll see a little function called Q&A. So if you open that up, then that is the way that you, the audience, can submit questions as we go along. So I'll be keeping an eye on those, as will colleagues. Please try and keep the questions short. If you've got questions which are just generally related to what we're up to, colleagues may just say, that's great, have a look at our website. If it's very specific about what the panelists have said, then we'll try and deal with it live. So keep the questions short and we'll get to as many as we can. So thank you. And I can see at least one of you's worked out also there's a chat function. So use the chat to do exactly what you're doing, to say hi. And you have to sort of remember to select the right people to say hi to if you've got that functionality. But please use the Q&A if you've got any questions as to exactly what the speakers have said. So let me just sort of tee things up before I invite Brett to share some remarks about what's going on. Organized tourism is fundamental to a lot of what ETOA does. And organized tourism comes in all shapes and sizes. Historically, a lot of coach tourism has focused on filling the bus. That has been the mantra. That's where the economies of scale come, and it's what's really kept things affordable. And it was the sort of backbone of how group travel developed. What this webinar is going to explore is just how fragmented and diverse that market has become. And small group tourism is one of the strongest growing parts of organized tourism. So if you're a hotel who previously had not considered that group tourism is your thing because you don't have enough rooms or that's not really the dynamic you're looking for, this may be a catalyst to think again, because you could fit the group that's a bit smaller in the hotel. You may have a restaurant that can do a table for 15 people. You couldn't do one for 25 or 30. So this is changing where organized tourism can go, and it's really interesting to hear the dynamics of what's driving that from a demand perspective and what the opportunities are from a destination perspective as this corner of the industry develops. So really looking forward to learning a lot this afternoon. So Brett, I'm going to ask you to start. You're all bright and bushy-tailed, breakfast time in Toronto. Well, a bit later than breakfast. But do you want to perhaps share some thoughts on whether this growth and the success you're seeing in this bit of the market, is this really just demand driven? Do you see this as a sort of permanent shift? What's going on?
So, Tim, maybe I could just first say that I was privileged to have joined Collette back in 1989. So I've been with Collette for about 37 years. Long before that, in 1918, Collette began with touring, curating guided tours, and we've developed over the years. So my perspective is with Collette is fairly broad. We launched for the very first time, we launched what we call our exploration style touring, a small group touring back in 2008. And it was more like an afterthought, quite frankly. Someone thought it'd be a great idea. It was more like, basically, we tried at the time to take our motor coach touring and tweak it a bit and make it small, mainly by limiting the number of people who were traveling with us. But we also didn't have the infrastructure back there in terms of transportation that could truly accommodate a group of 17 or 18 people. But we launched the exploration brand back in 2008, and for the longest period of time, it was a small fraction of what we sold. And I'm going to get to the challenges and the opportunities in a second. But it was really the pandemic. The pandemic did not change the demand, in my opinion. The pandemic changed people's notion of, or perhaps triggered their attention to small groups because we were coming out of the pandemic. We had been used to having more space and keeping apart. And I believe that I personally believe that it's not because of that this appeal for small group has taken off, but I think more people have turned their attention to it and they begin to see what the real value of traveling with 18 or 19 people is as compared to a large group. And there is value in the larger group too. It's not black or white. There's a million shades of gray. But in recent years, since the pandemic, certainly from my market here in Canada, point of sale Canada, point of sale Australia, which is also under my oversight, we've seen, I think you could say, explosive growth to the fact that in those two markets, anyways, for Collette, Canada and Australia, small group touring is by far the majority of the product we sell, if you call it that. Small group touring is taken off. I sit squarely within revenue management. So when this notionally way back when was a challenge for us to get our head around. You do not have the economies of scale that you would with motor coach touring. There's not the margin of error when you have 40 people traveling. When you have 18 or 19 people on average, you have to get a lot of things right. It's critical. And so yield management, I say that very broadly again, because it includes sort of many, many things. But number one, for small groups, at least at Collette, I speak from Colette's perspective, but efficiency is really, really critical. Well, essentially what you're doing, you're taking like at Collette, a tour operator that was used to putting 40 people on tour. In the small group space of explorations, you're reducing your travelers by tour by over 50%. And when you're scaling at at a rate that's you have more and more and more departures to more and more places, has less and less of an impact, but it could take an inordinate amount of work that would quite frankly make it prohibitive if you didn't have certain efficiencies, and a lot of that is technology. Beyond that, getting product to market at the right time and even earlier than needed is critical. Pricing is critical. And perhaps most of all, inventory management is critical. Again, you just don't have the margins of error. Now, if you do all those things right, what we found at Collette, and this is why, Tim, when we first talked, it's so exciting in my opinion, there could be a lot of reasons why you might not want to get into this space. There's a lot of reasons why you should. We believe in responsible tourism. We believe it's a better style. We believe there's better value, but increasingly the customer does too. And we see that because our retention, both our travel excellence is what we call it's like our feedback. The score that a customer will give to the value of the experience they've encountered. Our travel excellence scores are higher, and that's reflected in our retention rate. And why this is going to be sustainable at Collette, even amongst those people that might not have thought it was a good idea at the beginning, it's difficult, it's hard, you can lose money, is because our retention rates are much higher. And that's a really hard thing to otherwise argue if you were trying to make a case for not doing this. When your travel excellence scores are higher, your retention scores are higher, quite frankly, it's more profitable. If you don't do everything right, the efficiency, the pricing, the inventory control, it may not be, but we're finding it to be more profitable. There's every reason to continue down this path.
That is a pretty clear statement. Thank you very much for the background to that. And I'm sure I'll come back to you just to unpack some of those thoughts. But I'd like to invite George to follow up. You work with a different source markets, or certainly for the Topdeck product, overlapping for others, and a different demographic. So what's the view from Global Touring and Topdeck in particular?
Cool. So thanks, Tim. So yeah, I'll be focusing in a bit more on Topdeck today. And we recently just repositioned the brand with an all new portfolio and made a total pivot to offer only small groups. So I think it was my post on LinkedIn that prompted Tim to contact me to be part of today. And we made that decision all based on market trends that we were seeing and insights from a big piece of research we conducted. And I wanted to share a few of those updates and insights because I think there's some really interesting things that were coming out of what we saw. Just for a bit of background on who Topdeck are, if you're unsure. So as a brand, we've been around for just over 70 years, and we're very much known for that sort of coming of age, first trip to Europe experience for young travelers. Loosely aged between 18 to 30 something, but typically around 24, 25 is the average age of a Topdeck customer. And most of those customers coming to Europe are coming from Australia and New Zealand or North America. So there are big source markets. Up until literally quite recently, we offered a combination of group sizes. So we had a range, a bit like Brett was mentioning there. We had some small groups of up to 20 people, medium-sized ones up to 28, and then some large groups up to 48. And we were definitely seeing as well that rise in popularity of the small group tours within the range. But they were mostly single country trips. We weren't doing our big multi-country loops that we're most renowned for as a smaller group. They're all the medium or the large ones. And we were really seeing that in our numbers. So the small group range was growing, but the larger group one was in decline. And that sort of was several consecutive years on the bounce of decline. And for us, that coincided with Gen Z moving from being the emerging young traveler to being the core of the young traveler. So the kind of combination of those things prompted us to do this big piece of research, probably the biggest we've ever done in Topdeck. So big piece of qualitative and quantitative to understand the needs and wants of that traveler. So some of the headlines then, the great news, and it very much echoes what Brett was saying there, is that group touring as a concept is more popular than ever. So 64% of young travelers would consider group touring as a way to go on holiday. And that's increased from when we last did a piece of research in 2018. So younger people aren't coming into the category sort of unsure about it or thinking it's not a great way to travel. Consideration is growing, which is great from a broader category perspective. But while that's growing, only 2%, that's 2% of young travelers would prefer to go on a large group tour. And for us, this was the eye-opening stat of all of the research, and the single most significant piece. For a bit of context there, 2 people say that that's their preference. That doesn't mean 2% of people are traveling as a large group. Your preference isn't always how you book, and other things come into it around price, availability, and destinations. But you know, for me as CMO responsible for marketing the offer, I look at a stat like that and think that's not a future direction to take the brand in. So we needed to make some radical change, which is what we did. And when we were looking at the smaller group piece, it's quite an interesting mix, because definitely the larger groups are out of favour. The preference was in that space of around 16 to 20 people is where the preference was for small groups. And interestingly, on the flip side, 2 smaller groups, certainly for young people, was also not popular. People were sort of wanting that balance of enough people to enjoy the trip with, but not too small to feel that it might be a bit awkward. They might not meet the people they want to spend the rest of the trip with. The social experience for the young traveller is a really, really big part of it. So that kind of sweet spot in the middle, 16 to 20, was definitely the preferred group size overall. And then when we're looking at the importance of group size, so I said 2% of people would, only 2% would prefer a large group, much bigger percentage would prefer a small one. When we look at the drivers of consideration, so when we ask people, like, you know, what are all the things when you're looking at booking a group tour, what's going to make you purchase it? So destination always runs out. It's like people know, I want to go to Italy, or I want to do a trip to the Balkans, or they know that destination. The next one after that is group size. That was the second biggest driver of consideration. And given that you choose to be in a destination or not, it's really one of the things that are really driving that customer decision. So the overall group size was a really big outcome for us, and the reason why we pivoted the brand in the way that we did. One of the other key insights was around local. So for the young traveller, I think there's this notion of when they first travel, they just want to pack in the bucket list items, do as much as they can in the trip. But what we found is this idea of, yes, they want the bucket list items, but they want more than that. They want to experience local in a way that previous younger generations just haven't wanted to. So how do you explore local when you've got 48 people on a large coach? It's just simply not possible. So going for those smaller groups really helps unlock that ability to do local. And when we then dig further into that around what is it about sort of local that you really want to experience and enjoy and kind of take in the culture, food is the biggest driver of that. So food came out in all the different questions across the research, but people really see food as a way to connect local culture with understanding it. And larger groups inhibit your ability to do food locally. So people want to go to local restaurants, cooking classes, do tasting tours, which I think we might hear a little bit of later. And a smaller group unlocks the ability to do that. So that's another big reason for us to want to do it. So they're all the insights that helped us made that sort of bold decision to pivot entirely to small groups, rather than continue with multiple sizes as we had before and sort of just see the natural movement. We wanted to kind of establish that clear position and just be known for small groups. And now as a broader brand, we've got 3 touring brands that are all small group only. So for Top Deck, it's early days, but the launch so far, literally 1 month into the day, it's going really, really well, seeing some really good traction with what we've launched there. So if anyone's got questions, please pop them in, but otherwise back over to you, Tim.
Great. Thank you very much, George. And for those of you who maybe joined a bit late, there's 2 ways of asking questions. I'd suggest you try and use the Q&A function. That's the easiest one for us to manage, but I'll deal with the questions in the chat as well. So there's a couple which are around definitions, like what is a small group? And I think I can anticipate how the conversation will go with John and Richard's contribution. So small group could be 2 or 3. It could also be sort of 18, 20, 25. So we'll get into that. But just to pick up the specific comments in the question. So Sharon Cicchetti has asked, is the definition of small group the same for all markets? Well, small is not a specific number. So I think it depends on the product as much as anything else. So experience and walking tours, small tends to mean smaller than those who are building the business around a vehicle. And that leads us on to the point around what vehicles are you using? And Brett, I think you made reference to the fact that people got used to having a lot more elbow room during pandemic. People reformatted the interior of full-size coaches to allow people sort of more literally more breathing space. And I know, George, you're thinking about what's the fleet availability of the kind of vehicles which can get you to places that a car can get to and a coach cannot. So some of it depends on what type of vehicle you want to be able to use in order to get to the places which would not otherwise be easy to get to with a 7.5-ton full-size coach. And there's a specific question which Brett or George may have some insight on around how it's perceived from the supply chain. So, for example, Marco de Riva raises the point that generally speaking, hotels look at the travel trade, and if it's 10 and up, it's a group. If it's less than 10, not so much. But George, Brett, you're not aiming for less than 10. That's not economic. That's not what you do. So I think we probably will not be able to shed much light on Marco's question, but I think it's a really good thing for us to bear in mind that how is small group tourism perceived and understood from a contracting perspective by the supply chain. So let's keep that in mind. And Melita has sort of added to the sort of thought about which coaches, that the offer of smaller coaches is poor in Europe. And ETOA has been recently participating in a couple of coach tourism related events, and that does come up, do we have the vehicles we need to respond to the demand we're changing? So any thoughts on that, George or Brett, before we develop the conversation?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on the transport piece. So we have a sort of slight difference for either brand. So for Top Deck, moving to smaller groups, we use multi-modes for transport. So we use a combination now of trains, local transport, and kind of private coaches between certain places if the public transport isn't there. So it's sort of less of a challenge on the Top Deck front. The challenge comes in the logistics of planning all those elements combined. For our other brand, we use kind of specially kind of modified Mercedes Sprinters 18-seaters. For us, the purpose and being small groups means we need to be able to go to places that the larger buses can't get to. So we kind of have the position with our backroads brands that our mini coach can get you anywhere a car can. That does come with a little bit of a challenge when there's 18 people in the 18-seater. It's still nice and comfy and spacious, but all the seats are full. And we purposefully choose not to put an 18 group size into a 30-40 seater and allow them the space, because that goes against what the kind of purpose of the brand is there to do. But certainly our operations team do struggle with finding in certain locations the buses that meet our specification.
So, but thinking about your colleagues who work on the production side, in operations, and they're looking for hotels, they're looking for coach operators who have the Mercedes Sprinters. They're looking for restaurants who might not previously have thought of group tourism as their thing. How are those conversations going? Is that suddenly making their life easier, more difficult, or just different?
I would say different. I think that the types of certainly accommodation and sort of restaurants we want to contract are very different from as a smaller group versus a larger group. So typically how we would work is start with a fewer number of departures when we launch a series, so we're not taking up too much inventory, and then we grow. They see the sales coming in, they see the volumes, and then we grow that series together. So off the bat, we're not going in asking for to hold lots and lots of inventory. We build that relationship over time.
Got it. One question about using those 18-seaters, which was crossing my mind as well, and a very shy attendee called Anonymous has asked the following question. So, George, how do you manage luggage with the 18-seater vehicle? I mean, I guess you can set expectations pretty firmly, but how does that go?
Yeah, it can be a challenge, and it's something in our pre-departure communications we have to be very, very clear of, because space is limited in the vehicle. We just have the space in the back, so everyone can bring one large suitcase. Most of our trips will start and end in the same place, so we'll be able to store in the hotel. We've got arrangements to do that, but it does cause a little bit of a challenge on certain trips. What we find certainly is with Australians coming over to Europe, doing their 10-day tour with us is part of a much bigger trip. So they're not just packing for 10 days, they're on a 4 or 5 week journey. And so they've got a lot more luggage with them. But we try as hard as we can to communicate that in advance, but make sure we've got facilities at the start and end location to store some of that, because we physically can't fit it all on the vehicle. But yeah, that is something the operations team kind of have to work quite hard to manage, and the tour leaders on the road as well on day one.
Got it. I mean, Brett, thinking about the product and kind of where you go, is this causing significant change in terms of destinations, the places where people are staying the night, and the types of inclusions, or is it more of a kind of gradual shift? So it's very recognizably a Collette program, whether it's smaller group or larger group, or is it quite distinct, the difference between the two?
One word, distinct. 2 words, completely different. Yeah, and when we first started out in 2008, I would have said it's somewhat similar. But yeah, so it is very different. Tim, if I could, I wanted just to address Marco and Sharon's question with regard to small group, because I'm really, really happy it was asked, because a small group for Collette could be somewhat different, wouldn't be very different, somewhat different from George or Richard or John, right? Aren't notionally what a small group is. And I'm sure that everyone on this webinar is thinking it could be a different thing. I think the way we've looked at this at Collette is we just have to be very transparent with regard to what our small group size is. And we are. And our small group size is different depending on the destination. In Kenya, it might be 18 maximum. It could be, 22 in another destination. On average, you may only have 18 or 19 people. But I just think that because it is small group is really in and of itself a very broad description of what we all do. It's just really important for anyone who is working on behalf of a client, looking into a small group experience. I just think it's important. It's incumbent upon an operator to be very, very clear as to what the small group experience entails in terms of the number of people. And certainly at Collette, we do. It's easily apparent. It's mentioned with every tour we do, and it's different by destination, but it's never more than our top end small group tour in terms of number of people would never be more than 24. That's it. And it's many times 18 or 19.
Okay. Thank you. So completely distinct or completely different is interesting. And I think today, Sophie and Lo, correct me, I think we just launched our event that's taking place June next year, which is particularly focusing on shoulder and off-peak business and diversification of product generally. And that's really an invitation both from the demand and the supply side saying, okay, what do you want? We are looking for more smaller suppliers who want to work with us. We are bringing business outside the European school holidays. What kind of opportunities does that open up? So we really want that to be a catalyst for these sorts of conversations. And I think it's going to be interesting to get a sense of, is the pattern of travel changing as a result of this very evident demand shift? What I'm going to do now is ask Lo to play the Kwoni Tumlar video insert, because they very kindly sponsored this webinar. So Lo, over to you, and then I'll move into the second bit. That's great. And thanks again to Kwoni for their kind sponsorship. that's given us an interesting little taste. Trevi Fountain surprisingly deserted in that clip, and they missed the King and Queen of Britain, the other side of the river in Rome today. I'm now going to shift the focus to the sort of what everyone is calling experiences, and being alive is experience. So I think, maybe experience is a little bit of an overused word, and it relates a little bit to people marketing. The conscious traveler has become a very buzz phrase, and again, as opposed to the one who's asleep. But this is definitely an interesting area, and we picked it up from George. What kinds of things are people looking for that's just giving them a genuine flavor, metaphorical or actual food and drink, of a place. So what's local like for visitors, including the first timers? Because I think there's lots of assumptions that first time travelers just want to do the bucket list. That's probably an assumption we should be challenging. And it's certainly something that we should try to be influencing from the point of view of aligning interest between the travel trade and destinations. So it's great we've got John and Richard here today to talk about the in-destination product and how that's developing. So I'm going to ask John first to, share some reflections on the developments and demand and the business strategy you have. I mean, small groups is all you do and all you ever have done. But do you want to reflect on how you see things?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much. We are, as you say, we have been around for just over 20 years. I think it's 22 years now. And from the very beginning, we've only offered what we call private or small group tours. And to Brett's earlier point and to some of the points in the chat, what we do is, by being in destination and by running half and full day walking tours, what small group means a bit different to what it means for multi-day operators doing multiple destinations. For us, going back to the context kind of genesis, small group was very closely linked to who our guides are. And our guides are, on the whole, or they are experts in the fields they guide on. So we have historians leading history tours, art historians leading museum tours, and archaeologists leading tours of archaeological sites. And that's been absolutely key to what we do. And because of that, the personality of the guide is critical to how we conceive of a tour working well, and that depends on conversation taking place. So the reason we set a small group number of between 6 and 10 when we started what we were doing 20 odd years ago is kind of the dinner party number. How many people can you have a conversation with at a dinner party and form some sort of meaningful connection or a memorable experience from? And if you go too far above 10, that becomes basically impossible. Over multi-days, obviously it's different because you have more opportunities to form those connections. But on a 3-4 hour tour, we set it fairly low for that reason. And in addition to that, it allows us flexibility of itinerary, flexibility of how we move around spaces. It means that the clients can get a more intimate experience even in a very crowded space, because they don't have to follow just the standard paths which allow for very big groups to go through, which I think is kind of to George's point as well about the local, you open up different places if you can be smaller. And certainly when we operate in places like Florence, where we do a sort of artisans tour, or Venice, where we go to Murano and look at glass making, you to a large extent you can't do that if you have groups of 30 people, 40 people coming in, because these smaller artisans don't want to have that in their places. It gives you an opportunity. It opens up a huge raft of places you can take in as an operator. I think what's sort of interesting to us is that because we've always done small group, this shift in the whole industry towards small group being so important it comes with kind of pitfalls and challenges. One of which is this question of definitions. If you go on, any OTA and quite a lot of sites and look up half-day tours, and see how people define small group, the numbers can go up really high. I mean, people can be defining small group at 25, 30, where I think it stretches the bounds of credibility. I'm not necessarily saying we need to regulate it, but I do think it's an interesting question as to how we do define this. And for those of us who are doing very small groups, it's a challenge because to Brett's earlier point as well about margins in any small group experience, it's quite, your margins have to be very tightly controlled, and yet at the same time what you're offering is a premium product. So it's actually harder in some ways to bundle in, even for us on a small group offering, to bundle lots of things in. We have to our way of showing what our value is. It's all about this opportunity to engage with an extremely highly qualified guide. And that's kind of, the challenge that we see most in this is how do we maintain the distinctiveness of our brand when everyone is talking about small group and expert led. They're big topics and big terms right now in the industry, and we've been kind of doing them for a long time. So that's what probably I think that makes us scratch our heads most at the moment. But obviously we are benefiting from the boost in small group tours. It's obviously great for us, it's becoming such an important part of the market. And I do think that one area where we as an operator, and where probably operators like us can do better, is to work more closely with destinations, with institutions, with museums, galleries, directly about what offerings we can have for them, because as I say, we can offer the flexibility. So with a smaller group, we can shift the way that people move around a space or move around a city. We don't have to just go to the really famous sites and crowd them out. And I think in an age where obviously lots of us are thinking about how we do responsible tourism and how our destinations are perceiving how we operate, the small group is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to just slightly shift how we can have fruitful conversations about using space as much as it is about the numbers of people coming in. I'm not going to say too much more. I had one final note. I'm just going to yeah, I mean, I think the final thing I was going to say is just I think there is that space, that opportunity to talk more is one that we would love to find ways to do. And when we can do it well, when we form these close connections with either attractions or destinations, it is a very fruitful avenue. And we are desperate to also find interesting ways to rethink how to do our product. So we're always keen to have those sorts of conversations and work directly with people on the ground.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John. And we definitely will develop the opportunity for better engagement with destinations and attractions. I mean, I know there's some practical issues around, for example, ticketing availability. So if one of your expert art historians is trying to take, 3 or 4 people to a gallery, it's quite hard for you to buy tickets in advance if the gallery has changed the business rules, which says you need to book at least 10 or whatever it is in order to be a group. So I think there needs to be a bit more understanding in both directions about the need for inventory and when that need arises. So, context, sort of booking horizon is going to be different to Brett's, which is going to be different to George's. So like, how does the supply chain adapt and make sure that these various different business models have all got a fair crack at getting the inventory, particularly at museums who perhaps are not necessarily that used to working with the travel trade. This is a real opportunity if you want to do that. So I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit further with the questions. So
I think just to work on that, Tim, I don't think it's an either or approach. It's definitely a both and sometimes I think small group operators like us feel like we sometimes get a bit lost in the larger model people, and I think and we're not necessarily, what we think is that there's space for both. We just think that there is opportunity.
But you need to make sure that you're still being seen as the travel trade, and you're not sort of consumers sort of buying buying that way. Marco Castellan has asked a question about how your pricing model affects hotels and transport. And just to re-emphasize, Context doesn't sell programs which are multi-day. So these are in destination and they're largely on foot is the product that Context is selling. Richard, we've heard that food is why people are coming. Can you help?
We are so happy. That's the best thing they said all day. No, how we can help? No, so we are obviously very lucky that, you know, from the moment we started in 2011, the moment we started was basically going to the small local places to eat. And to go to those small places, you obviously cannot come with a big group because it basically doesn't fit in. So our group sizes are between 7 till max 12. That's where we're aiming for. And yeah, John was actually saying it. Obviously, our guide is making the show. They will tell the story, the local, what to do in that particular area where we operate, and having the tastings what you otherwise would not have. So that is obviously where we started it, and we're doing that. Yeah, in every single city we do. We're doing that with the city manager, who we always have first. So whenever we open a city, the city manager, the local expert, is the first person we hire. That person then obviously, you know, they know the guides, they know the local restaurants, they know where to work with, and then we're going to develop. Obviously, Tim, when we had this conversation before this webinar, we always try to be a little bit off the beaten path. The reason why we want to do that, you know, we just opened Barcelona this year. You know, everybody goes to the Ramblas. We don't want to be there. We want to be a little bit off the beaten path. Also because there are better places to explore. It might be, you know, I think we spoke a little bit about Venice. You know, we started Venice to develop outside, you know, outside where everybody is. We do end where everybody is, but then we basically leave you out there and explore where all the tourists is. So we do really try to give people the experience of the beaten path to really also help, you know, I think the locals, not that everybody goes to the same places. Obviously, when we do start certain places, people copy us. So it becomes on certain place we are now is a very crowded place. So that is, I think, something we are dealing with. And what we also do, we work with a lot of tour operators like Collette as well. Even when they have 18 or 30 people, what we do with them, we split them up into smaller groups. And basically they do all the same, but it's a lot of operational work, obviously, but then they basically still have that small group, you know, we always say being part of the purple family, as we say, we call it internally, and just, you know, be there in you know, places what is so unique to be, and the tastings what, yeah, really give that sense of community in every tour we operate.
I'm just thinking from the perspective of suppliers. I mean, we all know that you know, overcrowding is seen as a problem in some places, particularly at some times of the year. And how tourism is perceived is one of our biggest strategic interests as an industry. You know, and organized tourism really can be part of the solution in terms of bringing people away from the hotspots. And Richard, I think you told me a story about, I think it was maybe a restaurant in Castello, you know, in the eastern part of the island of Venice, you know, where you've actually been approached by people saying, hey, can we kind of get involved? Do you want to just unpack that a little bit? Because I think that's a really interesting dynamic that, you know, small independent businesses are becoming aware of this kind of demand and are sort of leaning in and trying to get found and get used by people like you.
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, Tim, thanks for pointing that out. So we obviously, when you operate there and you have the purple badge, you know, companies do see you around, and what is a good thing, and they reach out to us by themselves, like, hey, guys, can you bring some guests to us as well? Obviously, on those islands, in this case, what we talk about is a small boat with 7 people max who goes to an island where is a biological restaurant who makes everything themselves. There's no, I think they've never been a tourist actually, but now they want some tourism. And so we reached out to a friend with a boat, and we just go there and we bring 7 people once a day because they don't want more. Obviously, from a cost perspective, being out there selling through OTAs, you need to be competitive to sell that, because obviously there's high cost of the boat, the food, because again, we want to pay the guides good money because, there's a lot of operators, so everybody wants the same good guides, but also the restaurants, the costs are very expensive for them. So it needs to be, it needs to make sense for them to work with us, basically. So we want to offer them quite a bit of money. And then obviously it comes that you need to price it in a way that people are still willing to pay that amount. You have competitors. But going in that track, we as a company, we sometimes make the decision to just operate that product, even, the margins are not great, but we do offer it because we think it is unique. And probably we're doing it once, twice a week now, and probably next year we will do it 7, maybe twice a day. I remember 3 years ago we did one tour, we did 4 times a day. Now we're running the same tour 14 times a day. So it is growing and growing and growing. And yeah, I think that is also our role as operators to help to develop those cities. And I completely agree with John to speak to the tourist boards and say, guys, we can help you to really structure that and help basically to not only sell the, I'm from the Netherlands, if you look into the map in Amsterdam, then we spoke about this, and you get it from the tourist board. It basically shows the city center. There is nothing they sell on that particular map. So
yeah,
obviously that could be something we can all work on together.
Absolutely. I mean, we were invited to feed into a discussion that Antwerp is having about its tourism strategy to 2035 recently, and it's very clear that they, looking at the current, hotspots and mapping of where are visitors now versus where would they like them to be in 2035, and this is true for any destination really, they want that to diversify. So the diversification is not about necessarily being in a different city altogether. It's about being in different places within the same city. And I think that ability, that sort of micro diversification, which could be within an attraction going at different times of day, but also within a city going to lesser places.
I think what is interesting within that is also one of the benefits of small group is that you can think very much from the client's perspective. So it's very demand driven thinking, and we see this quite often when let's say we recently launched the Berlin food tour, and we wanted to kind of not have it too much in the center, and we didn't really mind where it went. We just kind of did some scouting around the city, picked a place where it had a high density of restaurants, and went for that without having to worry too much about where the kind of standard place is, because we knew what our clients wanted was to try the food and to get into a neighborhood rather than to be in a specific neighborhood and see specific things. And we're doing it recently as well with Amsterdam and the Van Gogh Museum, which is lots of people here will know has been very difficult for operators in the last year or so. And it's given us an opportunity to think about how we can cover Van Gogh and his life in a way that doesn't go to the museum necessarily. And I think it's an exciting opportunity to actually rethink how one designs tours to meet what the client wants and meet them where they're at without necessarily seeing where they're at as being that they have to tick things off a bucket list.
Sure. And I suppose also from a destination perspective, where, Amsterdam obviously has plenty of visitors, but cities like The Hague maybe want some more. And yes, you could certainly design a very content-rich walking tour in The Hague with, galleries like the Mauritshuis that it's going to be easier to get in. So some of that is about storytelling to attract the eyeballs to that product rather than the one in the more famous place, I guess. So that's where the collaboration with destinations is really going to come in. I'd like to remind the audience that there's still going to be a chance for questions. So if you've got any, get them in, because we've only got about 10 minutes left. But there's one particular area I'd like to unpack a little bit. a lot of what we've heard is about premium product. I mean, Richard talking about a boat of 7 people going to an island, really, great day, lots of attention, something you're just not going to easily organize yourself. That's not cheap. It's premium product, the money's staying local, minimum economic leakage. That ticks a lot of boxes in terms of what people think, tourism development should be. But not everyone can afford, higher end stuff. And George, thinking about your demographic, they can spend, but they're not necessarily in the same bracket. How do you see the sort of product mix and the sort of included content evolving to suit your demographic in small groups?
It's a really, really interesting question. I think there's as part of the research we uncovered was one of the insights was around an appetite for sort of lots of included experience, and lots of probably more premium experiences. But the reality when you add all that up means your price point becomes unobtainable to the majority of the people that would be traveling. So finding that balance is really, really important. I think a couple of things for us, and we looked at the mix of what we include as the price and what we include as like an optional activity, and tried to strike the balance there. But I think price transparency overall is super important. But the reality for the younger traveler is they are constrained by their budgets, and they will have to live within that, within those means. So I think where we try and focus is, how do we include enough experiences to make it worthwhile, but then use other ways to bring the destinations to life that are not necessarily cost inhibitive. So we had the walking tours piece earlier. So we'll often organize a foodie walking tour with our tour leader, so they can go and do that, have a great experience, and there's limited additional cost for us to do that as part of the trip. So finding ways to deliver the great experience and included elements, but not always maxing out on the cost.
Okay. One of the themes which I think sort of run through what all of you've talked about is the person you hire to be with your clients. So whether it's a professional art historian, whether it's just a local foodie who knows everybody, whether it's a multi-day tour director, tour manager, it really feels like the value add from your people really has opportunity to be expressed in the small group product, because you're sort of helping people really explore and dig a bit deeper than they might otherwise do. I mean, is that affecting who you're looking for, how you're training people, what kind of skills you're looking for? Because I think everyone's aware that in this space, digital guides are getting more and more sophisticated. You can just get something on your phone which is going to walk you around the hidden parts of whatever city. You don't need human beings at all, except you obviously do, and you're offering products which really do have that human connection. Is it getting easier, harder to find the right people? Is this something that you can get the talent for, or are there supply side constraints? As small groups develop, can you get the people you need to provide that, human touch that that's clearly right at the heart of your product? Any thoughts from anyone on that?
Yeah, I wanted to act on that. Obviously, we need more and more guides, and as you pay enough, they will come. Basically, certain cities, the fees are, I would probably change my job to be a guide in certain cities. It's like crazy. But no, obviously you want to have the right people. We hired someone, I think 3 years ago now, who's really into our guides program to manage them. They need to send out videos. We need to train them. And there's a lot of time and effort. What we need to put in them more and more and more. It's not that we send a script, we always believe in those, families we create on that time, that, they need to not only be nice to the guests, but in our case, they also need to speak to 6, 7, or 8 restaurants and be nice to all the waiters and the owners and, the chefs, because there are, without the guides, without the restaurants, there is nobody. And it's getting harder and harder for sure.
We know from a kind of language group perspective, particularly, say, Asian languages, which I know is not primarily what anyone on this panel works with, that's getting an increasingly difficult thing. So as group size restriction happens and a big group needs to be split into two for walking tours, are there enough good guides who've got the language skills and got the people skills? And John, I can feel a comment coming.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree completely with Richard. It's certainly a challenge, and when as things grow, it becomes even more challenging. And then there's problems around the regulation of guides around Europe, and some countries have very strict regulations about letting that many guides qualify at the moment, and they're not running exams and things. Other countries are, other guiding associations do set recommended or fixed prices at a very high level, which I'm an ex-guide myself. I'm all for guides getting paid a good amount, but it does make a small group operation challenging. I think what I was just going to want to add about it is also about this training bit and the human side of it, which is, as I said earlier, is critical to how we see tourism and how we see tourism developing too. And when we're training guides, we're often using the word conversation. We're taking people who have the subject matter and expertise and trying to make sure they get the people skills down for leading tours, and that bit is essential to how we see the development of tourism. Audio guides and things can cover a lot of things, but they can't do that connection.
I think it's well, just to build on that, I think the reason people are choosing smaller groups is for a more immersive level of travel, and as much as digital things can enhance and assist, it's not going to remove that human piece of a local person telling you their local stories of where they grew up. So for us, we generally use local guides wherever in all of our brands, but often the tour leaders will default and go slightly off of itinerary and show people the village they grew up or go to their family pub and take the guests there, and they're the things that take your tour score from a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. They're the things that really make the difference, and I don't think any digital element is going to be able to do that for us. When you think of the type of person that would take a group tour anyway, and then one that's opting to pay more and go by a small group. So I think there's always going to be that level of requirement for the small group. And for us, recruitment also a challenge as everyone else. I think where we've had great success is hiring people out of the industry from all walks of life, and we will then train them on the tour leading aspect, but what they bring is their knowledge, their skills, their life experience, and our customers love it. So we've had royal family bodyguards as tour leaders. We've had ex-airline crew, people from teaching universities that then just fall into it, and they really love it. So that's where we found a lot of success at finding new guides, rather than people that have automatically just been doing that for their full career.
Thank you. I mean, we've got a couple of minutes left. I've got one reflection, but while I'm sharing it, perhaps you could all think, if you've just got one final reflection of, where might we be in 2030 on small groups, and, do you need help from us to sort of make that thrive, or what's getting in the way of it doing well? That would be sort of good to understand. But I guess one reflection I have is that, we've heard loud and clear that group tourism is seen as a strong product by younger people. Now, that is not something that you could have nailed on with any certainty 10, 20 years ago, other than educational trips organized by schools and universities. So I think the future of organized travel seems pretty secure if George's data is anything to go by, and it sounds like there's lots of reasons to be positive about that. But with literally 20, 30 seconds each, if anyone's got any final thoughts to share about what the preconditions for continued success in this area might be, and any help you might need from us. But thank you so much for really an interesting hour's discussion. So Brett, any final reflections?
Well, our experience in the small group market has been one of incremental change. I can tell you that if you mentioned 2030, I would imagine that for Collette, the vast majority of all of our tours we offer will be small group. Not as small, maybe John is yours or Richard is yours, but it will be smaller than what our more than 100-year history has produced in the past, and it's trending that way, and we will live and we will learn. I couldn't agree more with everyone on the human experience. It's the industry we're in. We deliver a human experience. If any of us find us competing with technology or AI, we're not doing what we do best right. And so I'm thrilled to hear that everyone is seeing the same as we are, that there's more and more demand for the type of experience that we offer.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to go John, Richard, George for any closing thoughts. And if you've got none, that's okay.
It's again, obviously we are, I think John will say the same, we are already there. Obviously we do want to work closely all together, and I think sessions like this, like we're having now, and to keep on talking to how can we improve this for the experience of our multiple guests. I think that is talking to tourist board, but also with each other to really be out there in that market field and give the best experiences possible. I think that is critical. Like just one thing to add, Tim, what you spoke about, what is happening with all the guides, a small group. But in Venice, for example, now there is a maximum number of people, and then you need headsets. So it's already in those cities. They like, hey, you need to minimize it. The mayor of Amsterdam, it needs to go from 15 to 10. So all those things happening all the time, what obviously has a direct effect on
Sure.
on all the tools. So
Yeah,
we need to
the operating environment's getting more
so
challenging,
I
for
think
sure.
we need to be talking with those people before they make those decisions.
Yeah, fully agree, and we definitely try. So John, George, any final thoughts?
But thank you.
I won't add much to what Richard said. I think he's right. He spoke quite a lot for me there. I would just say that I think it is probably the way that lots of travel is going. I think it is a challenging space, and I think it is something that the more, as Richard says, the more we can talk, the more we can work out solutions across different people who are in the broad travel industry, the better it will work out for basically everyone.
Yeah, travel industry really is part of the solution if your problem is how to spread the value, that's for sure. George, any final thoughts?
I guess just to recap, I think everything we've heard today points to small groups being the sort of future of the category. It's where the trends and I think the category is moving to, and that is perfectly suiting the traveller of today. I think what that will likely lead to, I look at this more from a kind of a brand and a tour operator perspective, is the brands will start to communicate experience-led travel over price-driven communications much more. So all of the brands are going to be wanting those experiences. So finding them and proving the value of them as part of your tour package is going to be absolutely crucial and key for any brand that moves into the space.
Yeah, and more content-rich experiences is definitely what we're after. And I see Sophia Lowe put in the chat the link for the event we're going to use next June to really try and dig into some of the product side of it. So that's etoa.org/shop. Now, that's it for us. We've gone a couple of minutes over, but it was great to hear from all of you. Thank you so much for all the work you've done to sort of bring some interesting ideas together. I'm sure this conversation will go on and on. So Brett, Richard, John, George, thank you so much. See you next time.
You're welcome.
I'm going to ask Lo to play one last time the Kuoni video, and thank you to them very much for their sponsorship. And for everyone, see you next time.
Right.
See you next time, everyone. Thank you very much.
Yeah.